What I would like to do is to introduce this interview with me, Kelly Gerling, from the People's Congress, and John Mulkins from the People's Congress as well. We're having an interview today with potential candidate with the newly formed Justice Party. The website for the Justice Party is voterocky.org. And so for anybody who wants to learn more about this after this call, .org, where you can donate money, you can find out more about all of our. While we are going to discuss with Rocky the long-term idea that the United States can become, at the national level, a democratic government with a modern democracy, not one that excludes smaller parties, not one that is controlled by money, not one that is vastly unpopular with our own American population, and not one that is hampered by corporate and private money controlling the agenda against the will of the people and stopping the will of the people from being expressed in the policies through the various branches of government. And so with that, what I would like to do is to pose a question to you, Rocky, which is to describe, with all of your knowledge of the national government through this, could you describe your sense of the year, say 2020, 8 years from now, if the Justice Party was successful at pursuing a government that worked, a modern democracy, one that allowed and encouraged parties beyond the two parties, one that was expressing the will of the people, what might that vision of a democratic America with an altered government in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence and the right to alter the government look like in a couple of election cycles, perhaps out to the year 2020 or whatever year you would pick? Talk about the vision you have for the Justice Party transforming the national government in the direction of this sort of actual popular democracy.
It's an intriguing question, and it's certainly what we're all here about, and that is the future, bringing about fundamental changes in our system of government. What we would see if we were all successful is, first of all, an elimination of the corrupting influence of money, because we are in the midst of a true plutocracy, a government that is controlled by the wealthy. If we were successful, we would have a government that works for us, a government of, by, and for the people. And that would mean, for instance, that we would have a healthcare system, as in the rest of the industrialized world, where everyone would have access to essential healthcare. It would be a far less expensive system because the money wouldn't be diverted over to for-profit insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. It would be, we would have far better medical outcomes, because what we've got now, we are one of the very worst countries in terms of maternal mortality, in terms of infant mortality. We're next to the last in terms of infant mortality throughout the entire industrialized world. So it is a matter of life and death. We would have a vastly reduced military budget, because we wouldn't be engaged in wars of aggression. We wouldn't be building empire around the world. We wouldn't be engaging in these horrendous human rights and civil rights violations. We would be reprioritizing our nation's resources and providing a good, decent, affordable education for everybody, starting with preschool all the way through a higher education, either college or technical education. We would not have the kind of poverty that we have. And you won't hear poverty talked about by either President Obama or Mitt Romney. That is beyond Mitt Romney saying he doesn't care about the poor because they have, in his view, an adequate safety net. We have at 23% child poverty level, the next to the worst poverty level among industrialized countries. Among 35 countries, only Romania is worse than the United States in terms of the rate of child poverty. So we would essentially wipe out poverty. People would have the security of a decent health care. We'd have a firmed up Social Security and Medicare system because we would have Medicare for all. It wouldn't just be limited to those who reach a certain age. It would be available for everyone. And we would not be a security state any longer with an imperial presidency. I don't think most people in this country understand that our nation during these last 12 years, during the Bush and Obama years, and the Obama administration has been as bad and even worse in some instances than the Bush administration, in centralizing abusive, even tyrannical powers within the executive branch. We now have an executive branch that can violate the law at will. These are people who believe that they are above the law, just like Richard Nixon said it, and most of the country was absolutely appalled when, during an interview with David Frost after he was forced to resign, President Nixon, then ex-President Nixon, said, well, if the president does it, that means it's not illegal. We're seeing that kind of an attitude. Certainly saw it during the Bush administration, who kept talking about being head of the unitary executive branch, and he couldn't be tied down by Congress or even by the Constitution. And now we have President Obama. We have a due process clause in our Constitution that says government cannot take away somebody's life, liberty, or property without due process. And simply on the president's say-so, we are targeting U.S. citizens for assassination. We're engaging in these drone strikes, knowing that hundreds of innocent men, women, and children are being killed in the process. And President Obama in 2009 asked for, and now he has received from Congress, the authorization under the National Defense Authorization Act to essentially kidnap people, including U.S. citizens, take them away to a military prison, and hold them up to the rest of their lives. And it could be incommunicado. It could be their families have no idea what's happened to them. Without legal assistance, without charges, without trial, and without the right of habeas corpus. It is an astoundingly anti-American subversive act passed by Congress and signed into law last New Year's Eve by President Obama. This is what's happening in this country. It's on this, it seems, inexorable trend toward authoritarianism of a kind that is unknown in United States history. That would all be changed if we are successful. In 2 election cycles, we should be at a point where the people of this country know that their right of privacy is protected. The Patriot Act would be a thing of the past. We wouldn't have the NSA listening in on our conversations, all of which was considered a felony without a warrant, without a showing of good cause before the amendment to the Patriot Act. But this is what we've seen during these last 12 years, and we need to reverse that and get back to the point where there is full accountability for those who violated our laws, including those in the executive branch. No longer this attitude is expressed by President Obama that as to the rich and powerful, we're just going to look forward and not look backwards. And that includes those who commit financial crimes on Wall Street. If we're successful, we will not have any banks that are considered too big to fail. If they engage in these reckless speculative investments, that's going to be at their risk, the risk of their CEOs, other executives, and their investors. That will be enough to stop this kind of reckless speculation that brought about the economic meltdown in 2008, and from which people are still reeling in this country. Well, most people are still reeling. Well, those who engaged in these financial crimes are still profiting, many of them having received millions and millions of dollars in bonuses and compensations, and it all came from government bailouts of the banks. So we'll see regulation of the financial industry. We'll see a return of Glass-Steagall, the prohibition of common ownership of commercial banks, investment banks, and insurance companies. And I've got to add, we would have full employment in this country. We would be bringing back the millions of jobs lost under these outrageous free trade agreements that started primarily with President Clinton. And it just keeps getting worse and worse now with the Trans-Pacific discussions. Basically are going to create this sort of secret government where the corporations have rights even to overrule our legislatures. It's just amazing, and the fact that it's all being done in secret. So getting jobs back to this country, and right now, urgently, we need a WPA kind of initiative where we could be hiring millions of people to help repair and restore and add to our nation's infrastructure. Because as we're investing in these kinds of projects, we ought to be serving the future. And by fixing our nation's infrastructure, that there can't be any better investment other than education for our future, and we could be employing people at the same time. My high school was a WPA project. I put a lot of people to work. It's a magnificent building. It's rated still to this day as one of the 3 most beautiful high schools in the country. And it's still, now many generations later, still serving the community. So we need to do that, and in the process, we need to train people in green industries, green jobs. We could be retrofitting every one of our federal buildings over 20 or 30 years old to meet platinum or gold or at least silver LEED standards. And all of that means more employment, more job skills that are going to be useful in the future, less energy used, and reduced costs for the use of these buildings. So these are some of the kinds of things that hold great promise. So how do we get there? Kelly, I don't think that it's a matter of all of us speaking with one voice. That's never going to happen, and it wouldn't even be healthy. We need a lot of voices. We need, and we can learn from each other as we bring different perspectives to all of this. But the one place we need to find agreement as the American people is that we insist that our government serve the interests of the public rather than of those who are buying their way with Congress and the White House. And that's exactly what's happening now. We know that our government is up for bid to the highest bidder. We know that whether it's the medical and the military-industrial complex, even the prison-industrial complex. I mean, we've got private prison people, corporations that lobby for sentence enhancements so that we can put more and more people in our prisons when we already have, by far, the highest incarceration rate in the world. that also would change if we're all successful.
Okay. Well, as a final question, because I know you have to go to your German interview, I'd like to. We don't really have time to follow up in terms of the details of more about what your thoughts are on exactly how that would happen, given the structural limits of the system. At some point, would you be willing or interested in any sort of dialogue through a forum like this and through this sort of technology with, say, Jill Stein or a Green Party person? I'm talking about down the road, maybe after the election, to begin finding out how parties can plan to change the system itself so that the vision that you lay out is something that could actually happen. What are your thoughts about that? And then I need to let you go.
We need to collaborate. We need to come together. We need to bring everybody outside of this political duopoly together so that we can fundamentally change the system. And we can't be purists. We can't just say you don't get to join our team because you don't agree with us all the way down the line. But as long as we're all committed to getting the corrupting influence of money out of government, abiding by the rule of law, getting back to fundamental constitutional values, ridding ourselves of this imperial presidency and the empire building and the wars of aggression and the human rights and civil rights violations, we ought to be able to all come together and build a broad-based coalition. I wanted to do that before we formed the Justice Party. And it seemed to me, unfortunately, that there were those that just wanted to go the same way they've gone in the past, and that's no way to finally obtain electoral power. That's no way to shift the course of our nation's history the way that it needs to be shifted. So I'm totally committed to that. I want to come together with anybody who's interested in transforming our nation so that we're getting back to those basic moorings where it's not only the political values, it's the essential moral values upon which I think most Americans agree. So I really appreciate those who have participated today. I appreciate you helping line this up. I hope we can work out the technical problems, and let's do this again. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Rocky. And John, I'd like you to sign off. You have the last word here, and then we got to let Rocky go to his interview. So go ahead, John.
Well, thank you again, Rocky. I hear the urgency in your voice when you say that we need to form this coalition, and I hope that we can get that process started sooner than later. So as soon as we have the opportunity to get back to you, perhaps we can arrange something. As Kelly said, maybe after the election, but if we can do it even before the election, we'll try to make it happen. And we'll do whatever we can to facilitate that process. That's what we're here for.
And if I may just really quickly, I would be very remiss not to mention in terms of what we need to accomplish in the future, because this is the greatest, most important global challenge facing us today. It's right up there with getting rid of nuclear weapons, and it's dealing effectively with the challenges of the climate crisis, because if we don't do that, we are condemning those who come along after us to a very different, far less inhabitable world. And it's our responsibility because it can only be done now. This is the window of opportunity. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rocky.
Thank you, Rocky, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
All right, bye-bye.